Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the analysis of YOLENO TV. I hope you well from wherever you're watching this channel. Now, William Ruto found himself being interviewed by one of renowned journalists. And I'm talking about Richard Quest. Now,
IMF just released a report that says Kenya has now moved from position 9 to position 8 as the largest economy in Africa.
I was reading up on you. It must have been quite painful when you're described as the worst president. You saw that.
Richard Quest knew that Ruto was going to try to, convince the world that he's the best president. But at the back of his mind, that is Richard Quest, he knew that people look at William Samoei Ruto as the worst president. Ekele video ya kusema kwamba Ruto is the worst president. Now, this is just a snippet of that interview between Ruto and the CNN journalist Richard Quest. Now, for those of you who managed to go through the engagement, between Ruto and Richard Quest, you'll agree with me that Ruto is trying to do everything possible to convince the world that, look here, what the people talk about in the social media is not true. I am the best president and I have delivered. In fact, I've been advocating for a ceasefire in issues of abduction in Haiti. I don't like countries where people are mismanaged.
Health system, we've brought in more interventions that were there for a very long time, housing and everything in between, and very heavy lifting the last couple of 24 months.
The criticisms have been very harsh on you as you've been doing this, and indeed some of the criticisms in terms of the questioning of rights, of freedom of speech. Look, I'm always hesitant when I speak to a president to tell you about your own country.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, the criticisms say that it is authoritarian and that it is anti-investment. That the nature, the effect of all this is it creates an anti-investment environment.
So that's the kind of impression that William Samoei Ruto was delivering there. But guess what? Richard Quest was not ready to listen to those stories. And this is how he countered William Ruto. But people are saying that, So this interview reminds me of a time when Kimani Chungwa was also taken through almost a similar interview by someone by the name Mehdi, who works for Al Jazeera. So he took Ichungwa through almost the same engagement.
Kimani says, what do you do in a country where the institutions work? And I want to ask you, do the institutions work in Kenya? Is there accountability? What is your perspective?
I think we must begin by recognizing, Mr. Ichungwa, that there's a huge trust deficit with the Ruto regime.
And Ichungwa could not respond to some of these things, So what does this mean? No, we've seen CNN, we have seen Al Jazeera, and both of these people are hitting on the government. And most of the details that they ask the government are things that people talk about on the social media. Of course, these are things which some of them have been proven. But then the big question is, why is William Ruto still trying to struggle to defend himself? It's very simple. Ruto enjoyed a lot of support from the international countries, especially when Biden was in power. You remember the standing ovations. The big question is, did you see any standing ovation in this UNGA 80th? I didn't see any. In fact, I saw a scenario where heads of state were missing in a forum where William Ruto was delivering a speech. That is what I saw. But if you looked at last year, the previous years when Biden was in power, Ruto constantly received standing ovations during the UN meetings, during the African Union meetings, especially for the African Union meetings, when he talked about the issue of de-dollarization, that move where South Africa have been trying to push for a way on how Africa can, embark on de-dollarization, making dollar lose its meaning here in Africa. So Ruto back then was given a standing ovation. Also, when he talked about African heads of state being on the table, not just on the menu, you know, he said that we want to be on the table. So Ruto constantly received standing ovations. But with this interview, ladies and gentlemen,
our dollar reserves have gone up, doubled actually, from $5.7 billion to $11.8 billion. Our exchange rate has come down from 167 to the dollar to 129. That tells you the fundamentals are strong. IMF just released a report that says Kenya has now moved from position 9 to position 8 as the largest economy in Africa, and Standard & Poor's has just given a report that Kenya is much more creditworthy than it was 2 years ago. That
so
tells
why are
you
people protesting?
That's the essence of a democracy. Don't you see a demonstration around here?
I'm telling you, things are boiling nicely right now. How is William Samoei Ruto going to survive going forward? That is Richard Quest of CNN taking him head on. Now, of course, here in Kenya, it's not easy to interview someone like William Ruto. Of course, you can't interview him, but most of the time, you find yourself in a position whereby he's the one interviewing you. It's actually the other way around. But people like Richard Quest, Medi, they know how to deal with people like William Samoei Ruto. It's not easy for you to simply lie to them. For those of you who remember that engagement between Ichung'wah and Medi, you will say that Ichung'wah was literally cornered during that interview. Again, on this scenario where Ruto is being taken to explain, tasked to explain a couple of things by Richard Quest, again, we can say that Ruto has been cornered also. So perhaps ladies and gentlemen, just go below in the comment section and tell us what you think about this engagement between Ruto and Richard Quest. Do you think Ruto will survive Pale?
Standard & Poor's has just given a report that Kenya is much more creditworthy than it was 2 years ago. That
so
tells you
why are people protesting?
That's the essence of a democracy. Don't you see a demonstration around here?
I don't think so. So perhaps if you're watching this video and have not subscribed, take 1 second and subscribe, like this video. Until you catch up again, stay safe and stay blessed.